Well, we're back with Chris Waterman. Yeah, man, we're here to get his political perspective on matters. So, Chris, the Greens have occupied the space all this week in the media. What's going on?
Yeah, g'day Max, good to see you again. Another week of really interesting politics, and this time in the Greens, which I thought was an interesting perspective that's coming out over the weekend. Over the weekend they had their annual conference. The Greens have a annual policy of reconfirming or re-electing their co-leaders. Last year, I think you may remember, they changed, or at the beginning of this year, they changed whether or not their leadership criteria. So they confirmed that one needed to be a woman and one other. And that was often seen...
Oh, it's gender-based.
It was gender-based. It's now one woman, one other person. And that was...
Hang on. One woman... And one other person.
And one other person. So that could be gender diverse, not necessarily identifying as a man.
Isn't that discriminating against men?
No, not necessarily, because it could be a man who is elected into that role.
So why did the woman get a definite role?
That's just how the Greens operate. They've always operated on either co-convening or co-leadership. That structure exists right down to their grassroots. And in leadership, they recently changed to being one woman, one other person. Now the highlight there is people think.
Let me just clear my. I hate this, but because years ago Rotary, which was men dominated, were not allowed to just be men dominated. They had to be women as well.
Sure.
And there was a great upset about that, and maybe fairly justifiably. But nowadays, there's a lot of women organisation where men are not allowed to join.
Sure. Zonta.
Well,
yeah.
Why does they get the domination?
Well, I don't think it's about balancing out opportunity, right? It's not about one identifying as in leadership positions and not having another. I think it's about understanding that.
Anyway, we're not going to solve this. It's their problem, actually.
But and also, I don't care. I don't care if there's co-leaders, one man, one woman, one other. I don't really care. What I think people are interested in is the quality of that leadership in those positions. And I think that in the Green Party, they need to have a really good understanding and really think about what it is they're there to do. Are they there to make a difference in government, or are they there to agitate social change on the sidelines? And this has really bubbled up to be a key consideration for the Greens in the last week.
So in terms of reality, though, they are a smaller party. They've always got influence, and that's where they'd like to be, straddling the fence and being able to influence the power of being on the day.
Right now, they don't have influence. Right,
No.
In terms of, does the government really need them to push for the agenda?
The fairy dust is strong enough for them to dominate it alone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe potentially the Prime Minister has misstepped here by confirming that she would keep James Shaw on as the Minister of Climate Change, regardless of whether or not James Shaw is the co-leader of the Greens. I think that shows a disrespect to her coalition partner.
I never thought about that, but it does show disrespect for the party rank and file who are going to make the vote.
But also I think it takes away the Greens' agency to govern and select themselves how they wish. In this confidence and supply agreement, or the coalition agreement that they entered into, that agreement named who was going to be those ministers. So it named in the agreement James Shaw and Mariama Davison. That is unusual if you compare it to, say, John Key.
Winston Peters is probably agreements.
We're more about, they get 5 and we get 20. Interesting. I think that the Prime Minister probably, if she wanted to look at a way to give the Greens a little bit more space on the left to campaign going into the next election, may have used the opportunity to renegotiate that confidence and supply agreement.
It's interesting. I think, I like what you're saying, because by that time, the Prime Minister had been through the Winston Peters relationship, and she probably did not enjoy that, because Winston obviously put the brakes on a lot of stuff. And that's pretty obvious now. So what she's saying is, James, you're more pliable. You'll do as you're told.
Or she got freaked out. Or she's got freaked out and thought, actually, what I'm going to do here is shore up the support for James, because that gives me a solid, stable coalition to go and campaign on next year.
Also, she could be scared of some of the radicals who are on the far left of the Greens.
Far left. And the Greens left network, the GLN, which is almost as close as a faction as I guess what you can get in the Greens, is becoming more and more powerful. I mean, they were the ones that forced this renomination of James Shaw.
Yeah, I can tell that. And look, and that's Tell me how that works in their politics within their party. Is it just a select few that make that decision?
So they have delegates. So
Yeah.
I think it was about 125, 150
So
delegates.
how do you qualify to be a delegate?
Oh, don't know. In general, branches select who they want to be
Okay.
delegates when they go to
So
when
it's
they go
fairly
to
good
conferences.
democracy.
Yeah, pretty good democracy. And in the Greens' case, they can reopen the nominations. So they call it the reopening of nominations for the co-leadership at those conferences instead of reconfirming.
And that's annual.
Annual. This is
Whoa.
quite different to
It is.
expressing a vote of no confidence.
What happens to the National Party? How often do you look at the leadership?
So the leadership is up to the prerogative of the caucus.
Whoa. Well,
And at the time there may have been some constitutional change, but in previous years, at the time of selecting the leader, the rules of that leadership are decided.
right. Okay. Well, let's move on because that's really interesting, and I like the way the Greens operate because the rank and file obviously get a good say in this.
The difference here is that factions within the Greens have decided that they are potentially unhappy with James Shaw, have pushed him into having to think about whether or not he's going to continue to be the leader, but haven't endorsed someone else that can come forward to take that role. In the end, it could end up destabilising what is a broad church in the Greens between environmental purists,
Yeah.
say people like Jan Logie, and people who are more interested in social change, people like Elizabeth Kirikiri. So the interesting part here is how do those factions now work to support James if he is going to be the leader again, or the co-leader?
Well, I think that's like every situation, and that's democracy, isn't it? There's always a side that's probably against you, and look at the American politics like that, because once they go through their selection process, which is pretty bitter over there,
Incredibly bitter.
they've then got to get on and adore their prime minister or whoever's been elected or their leader of
Yeah, I mean,
particular party.
that's an interesting comparison to draw, because I think maybe you're right. What we're essentially now doing with James Shaw is running a primary, right? Like, is this person going to beat others to be the leader? And then when they are, will the party rank and file come around to support him? What we saw last time and what we've seen in the last couple of years about James Shaw's leadership is no, that's not always true.
Wow. And the other, what's the interesting factor, it's time, because the media have got this, are feeding off it right now and enjoying it, I would say, because there's not a lot of political news on at the moment. And so they're feeding off that. And of course, that time's ticking by, and the Greens, well, are they imploding? Because that was a word someone just mentioned to me recently. All the Greens are imploding, and I thought, no, they're not. They're just looking at selecting another leader, all endorsing the one they've got.
But
Or
I
two
think
they've got.
But I think so it's only the one. It's only James Shaw's position. So they reconfirmed Mariama. The interesting part here, I think, is what they've got is it's not necessarily an implosion, but it is certainly a more open way of expressing dissatisfaction with the party.
Well, it's pretty powerful because the whole country sees it.
And they have weeks to go before he is
Is it
reselected.
weeks?
It's weeks.
Oh, my God. I almost feel sorry for them.
I mean, it's a tough thing to be able to do, particularly because there's nobody else coming forward to be the leader.
Now, the big elephant in the room is Chloe Swarbrick. To me, I mean, it's just because we see her and she's such a powerful, dynamic, very, very capable person, and young enough, aesthetically pleasing. She's got everything going for her, and yet she's not even up there for the leadership role.
But incredibly articulate, incredibly intelligent, able to put quite complex social issues into a way that's easily understood by the electorate. My concern,
I'm waiting for this.
My concern, and I think probably Chloe's concern, is if you had two socially radical people leading that party, do you start to give away some of that true, real greenness, that the environmental part, the kaupapa of the environment?
Are you saying that she's sort of a radical in one of their factions?
I think she is there for the social change, not necessarily for the environment. And if you look at the issues that she has chosen to champion,
yes.
homelessness, cannabis reform, mental health, addiction, none of these things actually talk to how we care for our
The
environment.
core green policies of trees and plantings.
Now,
and
the other half of James Shaw is he has moderated that greenness to go, well, yeah, look, we had broad consensus around the Climate Act, the Commission on the Environment. He got broad cross-party support for a large part of the agenda going into the back end of the last Parliament. So actually, a lot of that green policy, then that true green environmental policy, it's settled. It's settled here in New Zealand. Most parties agree to it. It got a large coalition. So maybe all that's really left is that far left stuff for those Greens.
It's interesting. Last night I was listening to the Heather Duplessis-Ellis show, and on there she interviewed, what's the right-wing lady that does all the business? She's in the Herald, right?
Fran O'Sullivan.
Fran's view, wait till you hear this. This blew me away. She thinks James is not a bad guy. She said he is very good for the party. He's probably in the wrong party. There should be a turquoise party, or what is the one they got in Australia? And he should be sitting in that one. But she said he actually functions quite well as a politician.
And I think James is one of those people who would actually fit quite nicely into any of those caucuses, right? He fits okay into the Greens caucus. He'd fit probably more comfortably in the Labour caucus. He'd fit all right in the National caucus. It's a really interesting mix.
So, Chris, is he just pliable and that's why the Prime Minister loves him?
No, I think he's pretty good at his job, and I think that if the true change is protecting the environment and tackling climate change, who kind of cares how radical the agenda is, so long as he's making some incremental steps and taking people with him.
I know. I got upset with him when he went off to Glasgow recently, and I thought that was uncalled for when this country shut down, going through hell.
But that's quite different politics.
A whole plane load.
But that's different.
I know,
politics.
but I haven't forgiven him.
All right, Maxie.
But I'm not voting Green anyway.
No, I don't think I'll even vote Green either.
So, Chloe, why isn't she standing? You reckon she's frightened that she's going to dominate one faction?
I don't think she's frightened about that. I think there is some respect for the people who've stood in those positions in the past. So, to tackle James Shaw would be a very serious thing. I also think if you run the numbers in that party, he only just got the nominations reopened. He only just missed out on being reconfirmed. So there's still probably a strong, could be 75% portion of that party still backing him. Maybe the maths may not add up for her right now.
Right, and I think what you're saying to me as well is that she supports the other faction that is not trying to get rid of James and probably thinking, no, I'm going to stand with him as a leader.
I think there's probably more to be made in her career by not standing out right now. It's about timing, right?
Well, I know. I'm just going to say, you got to say it's fantastic of her to be like that, because Seymour did that time. Remember, David Seymour was offered, would you like a ministry? And he goes, no, I'm not ready for it.
Mm.
And by God, the hats went off for that. Well done. Mature. He was quite young then. He's probably ready now. But she's almost saying the same. It's not that I'm not ready, is that I'm comfortable with James.
And I think if you look at the real politic, the real politic here might be she might fail and be tarred with that. So let somebody else fail or recommit to James and see what happens in the next term.
Well, I don't see her as a wimp. She fronts up on that media, and by God, she can take on. She's
absolutely not a wimp.
Her and Seymour have bloody huge debates, and by God, they're both powerful.
Absolutely not a wimp.
She can beat him.
But smarter to go, is this the right time? Do I have the numbers? She probably doesn't.
How long has she been in Parliament? 9 years?
No,
years
I think this is her second term.
Second term. Yeah, she's quite. By God, I wish she was a right winger.
Oh, she's very, very articulate, very easy to listen to, and very easy to understand what those complicated situations that she's putting forward is. Yeah. So yeah, look, lots of interesting. I think Parliament sits this week. Maybe the Greens will get lucky and not have the media kind of circling around them. Poor timing from the Greens, but let's see what happens in the next couple of weeks.
Now, Chris, I've got some very bad news for you.
What's that?
Next week, I'm going to be in Fiji.
Well, Max,
it's sunning myself with pina coladas.
The week after that, I'm going to be in Fiji. Sunning myself, drinking pina coladas.
That's not fair. I was hoping to get one up on you there.
Well, you won't. So, I guess I'll see you in a fortnight.
All right, unless we do them remotely from Fiji beside the pool.
Yep, beam in from Fiji. I like that idea.
That'd be cool. Pina colada next week, folks. Maybe, hopefully. We'll see how the signal is. All right, good to see you, Chris.
Cheers, buddy.